Evening. This video documentation is in regards to the Depot S-Class W220 chassis, which is the Preface model. I understand that you might be having three-part concerns, which might be dealing with low beam intermittent issue, high beam not working, and also the signal light not working on the driver left headlight side. Pretty much this video is to cover some of the possible troubleshoot that we'd like for you to kind of do for us to better understand whether if the concern might be part internal or mainly dealing with just the components. So actually I have the driver left headlight side pulled out. I actually have a 12-volt power supply on hand that I'm actually going to run through its pin configuration to confirm or document to show you that the halogen light bulb lighting up. So this is kind of what we do in regards to the QC process for the headlights. So I'm going to go ahead and power on. So you can see that there's a halogen bulb stuck in for the low beam, high beam halogen bulb, and the fog lights halogen bulb. So if you can kind of come around with the camera, you'll see that you can see the low beam bulb on. And then I'll move again from the pin configuration. I'm testing from the main pin. So next pin going over should be the city light, which is a T10 wedge bulb for the parking light function. Moving over. This should turn on. Sorry, trigger both at the same time. So this next one should be actually the high beam, which you're confirming that it's not working. So moving on. I'm testing the fog lights, and lastly, the signal lights. So currently, of course, on a brand new headlight, everything should work as is, but I'm just kind of showing you in regards to the QC process what we do for prep headlights. For instance, if we are to add the HID components for the low beam and such forth. This being said, the setup that you have is actually an added HID components to the low beam. So in a sense, I'm giving you a brief overview of how the wiring looks like internally with the components kind of pulled out. So this is actually an internal H7 connector, which this should be connected to the HID bulb connector. Again, polarity does matter for these lights, so we have to have the polarity kind of ensured. Corrected line yellow to red, black to gray, which shouldn't be any of your concern at this point. I'm just showing you that I can test through the main connector to the HID components where all the wires are routed from the internal to the HID components. So moving on, getting the pin configuration to its low beam. And then I'm going to go ahead and power this up. Powering on, you can see the low beam works. So how the power flows is flowing from my 12-volt power supply unit to the main connector, the low beam pin configuration. Internally, the wire leads all to this H7 lead connector internal wise. Also, it powers down, it leads to the ballast 9006 connector and turns powers the ballast to power the HID bulb. I understand you're saying that you have an intermittent concern. Wondering if you can kind of do us a favor in cross-referencing the HID ballast to see if the intermittent concern is caused by this HID ballast. I understand to get to the bulb might be difficult, so all you need to do is pretty much, if in the case you have the vehicle in your possession, you don't need to maybe take to the shop, but if you install the HID ballast in somewhere that you could see, or maybe via zip ties, you can just simply cut them off. Wondering if you can unplug this main connector, which is a 9006 connector from the ballast, so at least free them up on that side. This one's super easy to disconnect. All you need to do, pull on this tab, release to release one of these. The same thing for the other tab. Pull on this tab to release, and you got the components out. So all you should have is the HID bulb still left inside the inner housing, and then you have a few wirings pretty much coming out from the rear housing cap from this grommet, which is pretty much how we've loomed it through the rear housing cap for you anyway. So you'll be left with these wires, which again, just leave them alone. You're working with the ballast now. This ballast that you freed up, disconnect this, disconnect the 9006 ballast mount. You're transferring this to the opposite side, connecting them, and of course, please watch out the polarity when connecting the opposite side. When connecting the opposite side, you'll see that you have one red, one black wire. On your ballast, you'll see you have one engraving for positive, one engraving for negative. It doesn't matter how the 9006 connector is facing, whether it be flat or vertical. Make sure you got the positive engraving to the positive wire and then negative to negative. Otherwise, it'll never light up, which is indicative of a polarity issue. So again, when you're transferring the driver left ballast to the passenger right side and then passenger right side ballast to the driver left side, check the connections, polarity, make sure everything's aligned, no problem. Go ahead, connect it back. Connect these two. You can't get these wrong because they're male and female, so pretty much connect them to accordingly. And then you got this connector, connect this accordingly so that you got your HID ballast connected properly. That way you can test the headlights to check for its intermittent functionality issue. Again, you don't have to move the headlights anywhere to any side when you're doing the cross-referencing for the HID ballast. So that's that for the low beam section. Moving on, so I'll disconnect the HID because I'm pretty much moving on to the other functionalities of the headlights. Bringing this back to the low beam HID halogen bulb. So the next thing that you mentioned to me that you're having issues would be the signal lights. The signal lights is fairly straightforward. We do bench test the signal lights prior to shipping out, but however, you are confirming that your stock halogen bulb still doesn't work with this signal light. What I kind of asked for you to do is wondering, I'm going to bench test it one more time to the main connector. You can see it illuminated, no problem. Alright, I have that. So what I'm asking you to do is pull the signal light bulb out. If you're able to cross-reference the signal light bulb to its opposite side, meaning the depot passenger right side headlight, go ahead and put this over to the passenger right side headlight. Get the passenger right side signal socket over to the driver left side, which you know that this passenger signal light is working on the other side. Get the passenger right signal socket. Go ahead, insert it. When you're inserting it, notice that there's an arrow here. There's also an arrow on the signal socket to indicate where it should be locked onto. So as long as you are able to kind of make out what's what, you shouldn't have too much issues locking on the signal socket. So I gotta have a good turn to lock it on. That's why it's on the headlights, has good contact. Powering one more time just to show you. So from the front, powering from the main connector. No problem having it light up. So again, if it's not working, it might be a case with the connectivity issue. I have never run into a case where there's an internal wiring issue for the signal sockets. Lastly, I understand you're mentioning the high beam bulb is not working. I'm wondering if you or your mechanic is able to kind of open the high beam rear housing cap to verify that you do see a high beam bulb inside there connected. If you see a halogen high beam bulb, which is an H7 size, connected, no problem. And wondering if your mechanic or your friend has a 12 volt power supply on hand, which I can provide the pin layout for this headlights, no problem. What I mainly ask, provide power to the high beam headlights pin, which I can clearly show which pin is which for you. So if they're able to connect the high beam pin, just wondering if you're able to directly bench test the high beam to have it turn on, because it's a little bit concerning or a little bit new to us that the high beam specifically does not work. So we're wondering if it's mainly just a contact issue with the pins being slightly further away from your factory connector. If that's the case, let us know. If in the case you're able to fully bench test the high beam with no problem. Moving on. So we've recovered the HID cross-referencing, the signal light socket cross-referencing, also the bench testing of this high beam halogen inner the bulk fixture, just to confirm what's going on with the driver left headlight side. If you're able to touch base with us in regards to these troubleshoot, it'd be very helpful for us to better understand what's going on with the driver left headlight side, being the case that all of this is pretty much what we check for prior to shipping. Again, your cooperation and assistance is much appreciated. Thank you so much for your time for the documentation.